Thank you. Just quickly to introduce myself, as you heard, I've been in this space for a long time, really starting with technology. That's my background. I did engineering at school and working in agile transformation initially, and most recently concentrating really on how we use agile and lean startup to drive business transformation for a big enterprise like Pearson. I'll tell you a little bit about the company if you don't know. It doesn't work. I can use the laptop if it's easier.
Spacebar?
Oh. So Pearson is the biggest education company in the world. It's been around for almost 200 years. It operates in 80 countries, grew by acquisition, so quite complex organization. Mostly portfolio of companies and not products, and something we've been working really hard to change in the recent years. 40,000 employees, matrix structures, everything you know about big enterprises, we have it. And as we've heard from many speakers so far today, there is a lot of disruption happening, and education is not different. Digital is here to stay, although some of the publishing executives at Pearson, I'm sure, still disagree with that. And pace of change is really high, as we know. Speed seems to be the only competitive advantage. Our traditional competitors have changed. There is a reason there is not a single publisher on this slide, because our competitors are different. They're big technology companies. They're Googles and Apples of this world, but they're increasingly more small startups that have 10, 15 employees that can move at speed that Pearson cannot compete with. If you just look at the edtech investment or the top 50 highest growth companies in US alone, with $500 million of revenue last year, but what's interesting, the revenue is not so high combined, but the average growth is 300%. So, think 3, 4, 5 years from now, and this is death by million cuts for Pearson. Jeffrey spoke about this, how do we know whether we are experiencing the Kodak moment? And Kodak is not the only company. The average time on the top Fortune top 100 list is 16 years at the moment. So what happened to Kodak can happen to any company, and they didn't fail because they didn't have good ideas or because they were not ahead of the curve first time around. Failure. 90% of projects, products, even startups fail. So failure is the most likely outcome. It's not something to be feared. It's something that we need to work on to avoid. And someone mentioned the Death Star and building Death Stars. Pearson is not, again, the only company who has attempted to build something big and invest hugely and fail publicly and be sued or whatever. So big companies do that. They go after big things because they look sexy. They invest hugely. They expect high returns. They just forget to test with customers early enough. So some of the challenges, internal challenges on top of everything that's happening in the market. And again, I've focused on Pearson, but I'm sure you've heard all of this. Hugely unbalanced portfolio. We do everything from still publishing books to owning schools to trying to do digital products to running English language centers in China. And when you think about technology, it's outdated. We have every single stack that you can imagine. We are struggling still with transition from print to digital. Print is still most of the revenue, although digital is picking up. But when we do digital, we still don't do it quite well, and it's mostly protective game. You often hear from executives, we want to protect our publishing business. We place big bets. Again, I already mentioned that. There is very little innovation or disruption, which leads to no underlying growth in the last 5 years. And when I talk about innovation, I really mean business model innovation. I don't mean, we have an R&D department. I'm sure we have few. We are very slow when it comes to taking products to market. It takes a couple of years to build something. It's often a big thing that goes very slowly. complex and very bureaucratic decision-making, as you can imagine. Customers involved too late. There is very little data when it comes to product P&L level data. So all of that obviously leads to a lot of complexity, no growth, very little innovation, and a fear of, are we going to become irrelevant in a few years? So we have set up this transformation program that I've been leading for the last 3 years. That's part of the Chief Product Office. And really the primary goal was to enable Pearson to grow globally, to invest in right products, to be able to innovate at scale and rebalance our portfolio, but also to transform the culture, even more importantly. So we are more nimble, attractive, of better talent. And the 5 pillars, as we've seen it, are adopt the portfolio approach, so really data-driven to ensure we are testing our strategy and reacting quickly to changes in the market. Introduce the product lifecycle, which I'm going to talk a lot about, which is based on agile and lean startup principles, which is a framework we introduce to be able to not only develop, but govern products in a different way that's more iterative, more data-based, more incremental. To support all of that, we have changed how we govern, so investment governance, the decision-making bodies, again, using modern practices, incremental investment governance. And then we've really focused a lot on best practice and behaviors and the changes in the culture that are needed. So how do we upskill? How do we build communities of practice? How do we incentivize our culture and our behavior so we are more prone to fail fast and learn fast and move forward as an organization? So a portfolio approach, and Jeffrey talked a lot about this, so I've killed a couple of slides. I'm not going to go into details. But it's really important to have a clear strategy, and strategy that goes across the 3 horizons, as we've heard. If you're just focusing on core and protecting the existing business and not thinking about adjacent or transformative innovation at all, then obviously you're in trouble as a business. So you need different lenses, you need different assumptions, you need to change how you do annual planning. So it's more responsive, more data-driven, more incremental. So your strategy needs to be measurable. You need to use clear KPIs to evaluate that strategy throughout the year. And you need to think about how you're going to disrupt yourself. So if you don't have any products in that third transformative horizon, then you're in trouble, obviously. This is what Pearson portfolio looked like. So we've used Nagy and Tufts' golden ratio, which is 70-20-10, and looked at mapping our products against the 3 horizons. And as you can see, most of our investment, not surprisingly, was in a core part of the business, very little in adjacent or transformative. And so, as I said, it's been a mostly protective game with very little innovation, or especially when it comes to new business models. And I'm a huge believer that digital doesn't just mean let's bring some technology. It means rethinking how we do business, because digital comes with different business models than print, for instance. We also, by introducing the product lifecycle, which I'm going to talk in a minute, thinking about the journey that each product goes through from inception and idea stage all the way to retirement. We also use that as one of the lenses to think about how does our portfolio look like? How many products we have that are in early stages, so in idea, explore stages. To Jeffrey's point around, you really need to open the funnel, and if you don't have anything that's in early stages, that's also a sign that the portfolio is in trouble. So we introduced the product lifecycle framework that's completely revolutionized how we think about product development and product investment governance. So it's a common framework that we use for all products in our portfolio, so not just innovation, we use it for our core business as well. And it's a repeatable, scalable process that's incremental and that's allowing us to place incremental bets and to really then use that to scale across the business and increase the likelihood of finding the 10% of projects or products that are going to succeed. It's also allowing us to compare all products in our portfolio using the same language and using the same data and criteria, so on a like-by-like basis, evaluating where we want to invest further or not. It's based on principles of, more ideas, opening the funnel, quick validated learning, fast failure. Failure, when we started this program, was a dirty word at Pearson. As you can imagine, you talk about failure and people think they're going to be fired if the idea succeeds. Executives get too personal and too attached to the idea as well, and sometimes that's the biggest problem. So we often talked about, fast learning instead of fast failure, but the concept is the same. Open the funnel, small bets, ensure that you're using the data and validated learning. Another principle of the life cycle is that, and Steve Blanks talks a lot about this, searching for a business model and executing on existing business model are two very different concepts, and startups are only in the search phase. Enterprises need to deal with both, and it's a complex thing to do, and you need different management practices to do both successfully. So what works in a search phase doesn't work in execution phase. You need different criteria, different data, often different behaviors. So what we have devised is a life cycle that goes across the 6 stages. First 3 stages are focusing on searching for a business model. So, and idea, explore, and validate, where we are focusing on, jobs to be done, the business model design, really validating the need of our customers, ensuring that there is a need, that there is a market, using different data and different criteria to evaluate those ideas. On the right side, so grow, sustain, and retire, once you get the product to market, when that product is growing or is in a sustain phase, you obviously have different data, different management practices. You can talk about revenue and profit margins and, usual suspects, but you need to behave differently in your search phase versus your execution phase. To support all of that, we have created the criteria that allows us to move idea or product from one stage to another. And supporting that, we have changed how we finance our investments. So we have completely abandoned the business case, because we felt that upfront business case with revenue projections that are unrealistic when you're still in idea stage and when you don't even know whether that idea is going to succeed or not, was not useful. And we didn't want to kill a lot of great new ideas based on unrealistic data projections. So we have introduced thresholds to help support management of risk. So when you're moving in early stages, we limit how much money you can spend to avoid teams spending hundreds of millions of dollars or pounds investigating a big idea. And instead, we have limits like, 50,000 pounds. Go run some experiments, come back with validated learning, or fail, but fail quickly and cheaply, not spending millions. When you move to validate, you're building an MVP. Let's focus on really the V in MVP, to validate that business model, to validate the product market fit. You don't really need to build a lot of technology. I know that's not a message you guys want to hear in this room, but there is a lot you can do with paper prototypes, with quick experiments, with videos, not build big platforms to test an MVP of a small product. The whole point is let's reduce the risk and let's get to those validated learnings and to validated business model as quickly as possible. We've also tried to apply a lot of lean startup and agile principles on the right side. So once you are growing a product, and you have your great agile team and they're working really well and they're a good oiled machine, how many agile teams do we know that are delivering on time and on budget and not delivering any value? Because we forget to ask ourselves, adding new features, are those features gonna introduce anything new for a customer? Are they gonna raise the revenue levels or not? So there is a lot of hypothesis-driven development that happens on the right side as well, where we are asking teams to think about what are the growth hypotheses, what is it that they wanna try and prove in the next quarter, and to then really come back at the end of that quarter and show the data and evidence of the work they have done. And to use all of that to build trends over time so that we can see how well those products are performing. One of the big challenges we have faced as a business is not distinguishing between products that are growing and products that are in sustain. And we've done the first kind of portfolio mapping to the life cycle stages. Everyone wanted to be in a growth stage because that was perceived as this is where you're going to get the budgets, and money. This is a sexy phase. No one wants to be in sustain. That means you're going to be killed soon. But sustain is actually a happy place to be. This is your big cash cow that's producing a lot of revenue, a lot of profits for the company. But you need to distinguish how you handle product and grow, where you're still investing a lot and still have all these potentially new market opportunities, versus product that's in sustain, where the game is how do we maximize returns. And then retire. Retire was a dirty word. We have a portfolio that has this huge long tail of things that are not really profitable, but no one wants to kill because we didn't have data in the past. We didn't think in terms of the portfolio or the life cycle stages. And there is always, one customer that's still using a product, so we can't possibly retire. And then we talk about, well, we need 10% of our portfolio to be invested in transformative innovation, but we don't have any money because everyone is fixing bugs on this product that's in retire. So obviously, you can see that by introducing the portfolio thinking and this new framework, you start to collect the data and you start to think about your portfolio in a very different way. Getting finance on board with this, as you can imagine, was tricky. First time we had a conversation about abandoning the business case process or making changes to the annual planning wasn't the conversation that went well. And it took us a year to get them around. And the main argument we used is we are really focusing here on reducing the risk of our investments. So instead of placing a big bet and hoping for the best, we are increasing our investment and our funding based on validated learning and as the risk is declining. So by the time you get to the end of validate stage, instead of the fake business case you will have had at the beginning, you have actual validated learning of that business model. You have a product market fit. You have a sale. You have a customer who is committed, your early adopter. So that worked really well, and this is now a process that we are rolling out across the business in all parts, all business units across the whole portfolio. To support all of that, we had to rethink how we make decisions in the organization. So from organization that was, as I said, portfolio of companies with multiple competing processes and unclear decision-making where a lot of decisions by default would go to the executive team because there was no one else to make them. We have introduced this concept of product councils, which is really our concept of investment boards, and they're embedded deep in the organization. They're close to product teams, and they make decisions on the parts of the portfolio they are responsible for. And we have really used the concept of agile and cross-functional working to assemble those teams. They're small, 5 to 6 people, but they have all the skills they need to make a decision. So they have representatives from product and technology and strategy and finance. And they use this consistent process that I've talked about to make decisions. So the same criteria for all the products in the company. Product teams present evidence to the decision makers, and they make decisions using data. Is it ideal? No. Do we still see some old behaviors emerge? Obviously. And a lot of what we needed to do, and it's not just about the process, it's just training, right? So moving away from I'm executive and I've been doing this for 20 years and I have a really good gut instinct on what this is going to work to we actually have some data. Do we want to discuss that data? And I think data trumps the highest paid person's opinion, but it's a transformation and it takes time for people to come around, obviously. So what all of this is allowing us is to start to build the view of our entire portfolio using this process so that we can look on quarterly basis how well are we doing according to the strategy we have set up. We are starting to build the data that's giving us that information so that we can react to changes that are happening, And I'm sure that happens to everyone in this room. You plan for something, and in digital world, things rarely go according to your 3 to 5 year plan. So a lot changes, product fails in the market, a new opportunity emerges, you lose a big government contract. And if you don't have ability to react throughout the year, you're in trouble as a business. So to scale all of this, we have introduced the portfolio tool that we're in process of integrating with all the oracles and CRMs of this world so that we can have that comprehensive data set all in the same place that can enable us to make more active portfolio decisions, run all sorts of portfolio reporting, but also it allows us to really support this concept of decentralized decision making, because we have full transparency of decisions that have been made. So it's easier for executives to step back and say, okay, I know that so-and-so has made a decision. I know that they use the data and the criteria we agreed, and all of that information is in that tool. So to support a lot of process changes, as I said, we invested a lot of time in building this ecosystem of cultural changes, of redefining how we do things, investing in talent. So a lot of changes when it comes to practices and behaviors. So what the product lifecycle, for instance, defines, it's not just the stage gate criteria. It defines all the things that you should think of to do as a team, as a cross-functional team in each of the stages. So again, using principles of lean startup, of experimentation, of agile to really deliver value to customer, to focus early on need, to experiment, to get to those validated learnings as quickly as possible. So what we have in our ecosystem is a core team that I have been managing that's really driving the transformation. A lot of training and coaching that I'm going to talk about, a lot of community building, which is really important. And it really starts with redefining how we do product development. When we talk about cross-functional teams, and I hope you all agree, we don't think just about a bunch of developers with a product manager and UX guy in a room somewhere. We really think all the business people as well. So, and your finance, and your HR, and your marketing, because otherwise, sales, you cannot bring a product to market. And you start to build silos that you cannot break. And because of lack of communication or lack of access to customer, you don't get the data you need. When we started this, sales were the only people allowed to talk to customers. And by the time you get to product manager or developer, it's 6 degrees of separation and Chinese whispers, and you don't really have a clue whether a customer wants a feature of a product, right? So building on that, we have heavily invested in training, starting with leadership training and development, going, as I said, into re-educating our executives on how to make decisions differently, doing lots of roadshows in the first year, bringing all of this to the whole company, talking about what this means in terms of ways of working. But more importantly, a lot of training for product teams, starting with basic agile and lean startup training. We had courses we called how to speak to customers, training people on basic tools like business model canvas or value proposition canvas. And then over time, we realized that we cannot drive change of this scale with just a small team. So we really wanted to distribute the knowledge as much as possible and build capacity in all the business units. So we introduced the Lifecycle coach program. And over the last year, we have trained 150 people on how to do this. And they're really, extension of our team. They're our ambassadors and evangelists. They're sitting in business units. They're coaching product teams. And initially, we thought this is going to be a great, not just career development program, and a great way for them to support this transformation in the business unit where they're working, where they understand the domain really well. What we realized as well over time, that it was a great opportunity to match an idea is emerging in a part of a business or geography, they don't really have the skills or the team to pursue it. And then we have coaches or product teams somewhere else, and we can do the matching as well. And people love that. They get exposed to different businesses, and as a career opportunity or secondment worked really well as well. I can't emphasize enough how important this was for us. We started by building a really strong community of agile and lean practitioners in the business, but we also were very aware that we are not the only company with the challenges I've described. So over time, we've really built a strong relationships with many other enterprises going through transformation like this. We've been bringing speakers from other industries to Pearson, building relationships, getting experts to come and either talk to a board or give training to our product teams. We've supported and sponsored pretty much every meetup group and run sessions monthly in London, New York, and other centers. And it's been great to share the learnings and also expose our folks to how things are done somewhere else, and for them to realize we are not the only one struggling with this thing, or we are not unique, because what you hear a lot, and I'm sure you guys hear the same, we are very special. You don't understand our challenges. Our challenges are unique. And this is not for Pearson. You go within individual business unit or department, and you're going to hear that, English business thinks that they're more special than higher education business or school business, or that their challenges are very, very different. So bringing them together through this community, exposing them to, GE having similar challenges or approaching things in a similar way using Lean Startup was very, very useful. So as I said, culture is key, really working hard on changing the DNA of the company. Otherwise, if you're focusing just on the processes or governance, things obviously don't work. You need the whole company, you need the leadership, most importantly. I can't agree more. Everything starts with the CEO and the executive team, and if you're just getting a lip service of support, then you're never going to be successful. They need to be driver of this change. But I'm a huge believer that change happens at every level in the organization. You can get a top-down command to go, but if your troops are not supporting this or not believing in it, then you're not going to be successful. Equally important, you need to line your incentives, right? So if you are still rewarding the sales team in an old way and you're trying to bring this new product to market and you're still in an MVP stage, the sales team is not going to be incentivized to show this MVP to a customer, right? So everything has to be changed. If you're talking about failing fast, then you need to encourage people to fail fast. You need to reward them for failing fast because they're saving company lots of money, right? So there is a lot that needs to happen. We are working at the moment on rethinking our performance reviews and our incentive plans and really thinking about, how are we embedding this change throughout the organization. It's been a challenging couple of years to, scale something like this across the organization. It takes years. It's not one-off. It doesn't happen overnight. We've been very ambitious and tried to tackle a lot of work, but it's been beyond challenging, as you can imagine. And I think I've covered some of the challenges already. And I think this is something that we have now the whole organization supporting, and it's really rewarding to see how much change is happening in the organization already, although everyone is aware that this is just the beginning of the journey and there is still a lot to do. So this is all from me. I'm very happy to answer any questions you have.
So while we take a few questions, Aid, if you don't mind sitting up behind us. So I'll start with the first question. So how does that portfolio split between core and new look today after you've gone or adopted this new way of working?
Well, it's still early days. It's changing slowly by, making first some decisions through the annual planning process on how much we're going to invest in adjacent and transformative, and this is something we have done in the last 12 months. So you're seeing more investment in Horizons 2 and 3, which is great. We are seeing a lot of more small bets, so we've used this process now in 6 or 7 big business units, so it's still not scaled completely across the business. But we are seeing, we have tested recently a partnership with IBM using this process, whereas in the past we would go and sign the contract immediately without thinking how we're going to use it. And in 6 weeks, we evaluated 50 ideas, and we spent less than $50,000 evaluating those ideas. We've launched the social incubator 6 months ago and encouraging more innovation in the company, and it's been working really well.
Impressive. Any questions from the, Carl Peter?
Yep, so just a quick question. What is your most important learning from this transformational journey, if you like?
I think leadership and getting leadership support is really, really important. We had the support on paper from the start. They formed a team, they gave us a budget, they hired me and a bunch of other folks. And I can't tell you how many meetings I went where they said, we endorse, go ahead, do it, and then they leave a room and forget to tell people that we just agreed to do this. And then you go to the next level and they have no clue what you're talking about. So getting them to understand why you're doing this, you can't talk about agile or lean because they don't really get that. But when you concentrate on what the business benefits are, then they start to turn around. So investing a lot in that conversation, in training, in explaining how things work was really important. Another thing, just investing in talent. People want to be part of this. They think that this is the most exciting thing we have in the business, but you need to bring them on the journey. Otherwise, they feel like, I work in a publishing business, my days are numbered, and actually they're not. There is so much you can learn from this and the way you can change how you work, and you also have to listen and, bring some of what they know about the business to the table as well. And the third thing for me is diversity. Not only am I the only female speaker here, but I've learned over years that we tend to hire people who come from similar backgrounds, and in publishing and education especially, you see executives go from Pearson to other publishing companies, and this is why the industries don't get disrupted. This is why we as a society don't move quickly enough. So you really need to disrupt how you work, who you hire. You need to bring different people, different talent people who are going to challenge. I heard a couple of people from the Lean Startup movement, and one of my folks in New York, he shows up to work in shorts and flip-flops every single day, and he goes to a meeting with an executive, and it's great, and he asks the hard questions that people in the room wouldn't necessarily ask, and you need that, because if you only have people who are asking the same all the questions all the time, you're never going to affect the change.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that was actually it was a conversation we had over dinner last night as to how much can you actually expect an existing organization to change versus bringing in new talent. I mean, I don't think there is any formula for this, but is that a conscious? I mean, are you guys aware of how much new sort of thinking styles and energy and new style type people that you have to bring in to make this work?
I think you need disruptors. So in the first year, I told my team, you have one thing to do this year. Forget about everything else. All our targets, the roadmap, everything we had. Disrupt the hell out. And you need to hire those disruptors at every level. Not just product teams, that's easier. But management, the executive team, you have to have people who come from outside. I can't tell you what that percentage looks like, and it's going to be different from company to company. But I'm a believer that people can change and industries change, and we've seen so much disruption. I worked in TV industry before, and when we talked about video on demand, they were like, "That's never going to happen, right? And we can't cannibalize our linear TV revenue by giving you digital rights to all these programs." And look at it now. Look what Netflix has done. And this is happening across the piece. So you need people who have experienced that somewhere else. And whatever the industry was, you need some of those people in the organization.
How many of the audience have actually implemented a lean startup way of working or thinking? Anybody who want to share what was tough? Yeah?
So yeah, in a couple of scenarios, I've seen it provide a real good kind of kick to the kind of transformation initiative, and people spot that new way of working. The real challenge is holding on to that multidisciplinary team afterwards. So everybody gets fascinated about the experiment, and we see an awful lot of movement around the experiment, and we see a profound transformation on the back of it. But in the larger organizations, again, it's difficult to hold on to that team when before we've transformed finance and everybody else, because people have to fall back into the regular pattern. So I think the hardest thing is holding on to that team subsequent to the lean startup operation. Yeah. And certainly replicating that. So again, you tend to put the stars in the first lean startup experiment. They do smash it out of the ballpark, but then that just reveals that's actually a very rare group we've got together there. And to replicate that, we do actually have to replace lots of other teams. So yeah, it's the momentum thing, getting the momentum thing working. I've struggled with.
And it's much easier to do it on a small scale, to implement lean startup when you're building a product. It's one thing, you focus on just that product. You don't have all the politics or, all the existing technology you need to deal with, or existing processes, finance with annual planning and, shareholders to worry about. So it's a different ball game. We've started with, 3 or 4 pilots initially. It worked like magic. It was great, right? And then you try to test it in a business unit, and you start to run into all of the issues of, well, we want to do this and we want to follow this new process. It's great, but Finance are asking us still for a business case, or, hey, but here's the annual planning process, and it doesn't work. So if you want to transform the organization, you need to tackle all of that, and that's a hard thing. This is where you run into the cultural issues of this is not how we do the business, and yes, we need to report to shareholders, so we can't run that risk. And
so a change agent like yourself, are you reporting directly into, what level are you reporting into? What's your empowerment?
I'm reporting into executive member, which helped a lot.
So do you feel empowered? I mean, can you make the needed decisions and structure and in the organization? Is that how it's set up?
I have been taught early in my career to ask for forgiveness and not for permission, so I've been employing that tactic throughout.
Good. Right, we have another question, yeah.
So I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about crossing the chasm and such. I think the scarce ingredient in this model is going to be, to your point, is the entrepreneur. So in venture capital, the number one decision is like investing in an entrepreneur. And I think if you just said, would the process run without an entrepreneur, I don't think you would get to scale. I think you would get to the first three. You remember when you had your dotted line? That dotted line is a tough line to cross. And I think it takes an entrepreneur who will literally break, and it can't be you. You're running the process. There's got to be an owner that's going to do it. And I think selecting for that one individual talent may be a critical success factor.
And empowering that one person and giving him or her a leeway to go and do it which is why I said, working with HR now to rethink how we incentivize people. How do you incentivize someone like that in a big organization so they're not just working for a salary, right?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sonja. Well said.